identifying healthcare workers who will be first to get vaccinated. This comes as the IATF approved the list of priority population groups for the mass inoculation.
Why are we getting these vaccines and why are we prioritizing these vaccines to the frontliners? Because we want to get the soonest protection among the vulnerable, and hopefully everyone will get to be vaccinated in that priority list.
One DOST official says vaccine hesitancy is not uncommon in the rest of the world. PCHRD Executive Director Jaime Montoya said that vaccine acceptance rates in other countries are also low.
Dapat po sana nating isipin na weighing the benefits versus the risk. Mas malaki pa rin po ang benepisyo na ating matatanggap kung tayo po ay magpapabakuna against COVID-19.
The government has updated its priority list in the vaccination program and has allotted 362 million pesos for genomic surveillance for a better understanding of the virus and to make the vaccination program more responsive.
But according to think tank IBON Foundation, the government's fixation on vaccines could be counterproductive if there are no sufficient economic programs to uplift the country from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And to cap a rather rough week in red tagging, when will the military stop red tagging and start upholding press freedom? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs.
And welcome to this weekend edition of The Chiefs. With us, of course, in the studio is Robbie Lampay of One News. Hi, Robbie.
Hi.
And joining us in a few minutes will be Ana Marie Paminton of the Philippine Star. She is not yet online. However, our guest is already online, so let's bring him in. Our first guest for tonight is Dr. Francisco Tranquilino, an associate professor at the UP College of Medicine. He is also a practicing cardiologist with a background in clinical epidemiology. Good evening, Dr. Tranquilino, and thank you for joining us.
Yes, good evening, Ed and Robbie.
Magandang gabi, Doc.
Magandang gabi po. Well, Doc, the past
Yes,
week we've been
magandang
talking quite a bit about the low numbers we've been seeing as far as yung vaccine confidence in the Philippines is concerned. And your group has also noted with alarm yung mababang numbers. But I also understand po that your group, specifically si former Secretary Esperanza Cabral, said that boosting the public's confidence in vaccine is primarily a task that should be led by health workers and not by politicians. Why do you see the distinction? Why make the distinction? Why not both of them at the same time?
Tama yun, Robbie. Sa mga pag-aaral kasi ngayon, ng mga nakaraang 2 taon, lalo na nung nagsimula yung gulo sa dengue, bumaba yung vaccine confidence sa bansa natin. Sa ngayon, tingin ko ang figure is nasa 23.7% lamang sa mga Pilipino ang pumapayag na magpabakuna sa COVID-19 kung sakaling magkaroon na tayo nito. Ang gusto sana namin ay ang mga dalubhasa lamang or medical experts ang magpayo, ang magbigay ng payo sa ating mga kababayan. Sapagkat tingin namin kami ang mas nakakaalam kung ano ang mas epektibo, kung ano ang mas nararapat na bakuna para sa ating mga kababayan.
Yes,
maaring tumulong ang ibang tao tulad ng mga lawyers halimbawa o mga politiko sa pamamagitan ng pagkikayat sa kanila na magpabakuna o magkonsulta sa mga dalubhasa. Subalit kung ang pag-uusapan ay yung detalye ng kung ano ang epektibong bakuna, ano ang safe na bakuna, tingin ko dapat ang mga ito ay nasasagot lamang ng mga medical experts o dalubhasa.
Well, I think naman, sir, Doc, by the way, I'm Ed. I think naman, Doc, we all agree on that, that it is the doctors who should talk to us about which vaccine is the best or the safest. Pero po, in addressing po yung question ng vaccine confidence in general, kasi po, for example, former Secretary Cabral made note of a US survey that showed that Americans would, of course, prefer to listen to their doctors than their politicians. And I would understand in that po. However, in the Philippines po, how many Filipinos have their own doctors? Most Filipinos, or actually few Filipinos nga, would even get to see their barangay health workers, if at all. So in the end po, wala silang masyadong fallback, I suppose.
Tama rin yun, no? So, konti kasi karamihan sa mga Pilipino hindi rin nakakakita ng kanilang mga doktor. Subalit para dun sa mga mayroong sariling doktor o may family physician, mas maganda kung doon sila sa sangguni. Subalit dun sa mga hindi nakakaabot o nararating ng mga manggagamot, may yung mga mass media siguro, social media, TV, radio, maaring doon magpunta yung mga manggagamot o mga dalubhasa upang ipaliwanag sa ating mga kababayan ng tungkol sa bakuna. Ang nangyayari kasi ngayon, kung saan-saan natin naririnig o kung kani-kanino natin naririnig yung mga tungkol sa bakuna na hindi ito safe dahil gawa sa isang bansa, hindi sa ganitong bansa. So, naguguluhan yung taong bayan kung sino yung paniniwalaan. So, tingin ko dapat maitukoy lamang natin kung sino talaga yung nakakaalam tungkol sa mga bakunang ito.
Dr. Robbie po,
Yes, Robbie.
si Navotas Mayor Toby Chanco puts has a finer take on yung reluctance ng mga tao pagdating sa bakuna. Kasi napansin nga nila, like everybody said, no, if it's yes or no, more than 50% are saying, no, hindi pa ako ready and ayoko. No? But he said when they looked deeper, the people were saying, hindi ko naman sinabing ayoko. Ang sinasabi ko lang, mauna siya. No, parang pagka may nakita akong mauna, ayan, sige, di ba? But at the same time, the people that you're looking at, ayaw mauna or ayaw mauna in public. We keep talking about President Duterte saying na he would prefer to do it behind closed doors. We asked Mayor Chanco himself and he said, kung Sinovac, aminin ko sa inyo, ayoko namang mauna rin.
Tapos si Red Cross Chairman Richard Gordon din.
That's right. Oh. So how do we break that cycle?
Doon natin makikita talaga yung kahalagahan ng tamang informasyon, no? Pero normal na behavior yun ng tao siguro, lalo na sa mga Pilipino, na bago ako, gusto ko muna makikita yung kabila na gawin mo sa kanya bago ko siya tanggapin. Subalit kung may papaliwanag natin ng mabuti ang kahalagahan ng pagbabakuna, lalo na sa panahon ng pandemya, tingin ko naman maliliwanagan ng taong bayan na hindi natin kailangang antayin yung ating kapitbahay o yung kaibigan na mabakunaan bago tayo mabakunaan. Kulang lamang siguro tayo sa tamang impormasyon na naipaparating sa kanila.
Oh, but at the same time, Doc, we also look back, and we all keep citing na hindi itong Dengvaxia episode obviously had an effect. Lumakas yung mga anti-vaxxers because of this experience with Dengvaxia. But if you take that example, the information was there. The information campaign was there. Everybody was saying we need to counter the anti-vaxxer movement. That was what, 2-3 years ago? I mean, what did we learn about trying to bring back confidence in the national vaccination programs, never mind COVID? What did we learn from Dengvaxia that we still aren't doing?
Well, bago pa man yung Dengvaxia, meron na din talaga yung issue na vaccine confidence. No? May mga anti-vaxxers talaga bago pa dumating yung Dengvaxia. Pero specifically para sa ating bansa, noong 2018 to 2019, yung issue ng Dengvaxia. Maraming mga kasinungalingan ang narinig natin sa social media, sa mainstream media, maging sa Senado at sa Kongreso na hindi natuloy alam ng tao kung ano yung tama. Subalit dahil paulit-ulit na lang araw-araw naririnig natin na may problema yung Dengvaxia, natanim sa kanilang isipan na talagang masama yung Dengvaxia. Subalit kung aaralin mo lahat ng mga clinical trials ng Dengvaxia, epektibo ang gamot na to sa panglaban sa dengue. Lahat ng bansa sa buong mundo kung saan may problema ng dengue, gumagamit ng Dengvaxia. Sa Pilipinas lamang tayo, hindi gumagamit nito dahil nga sa mga nangyari noong 2018 to 2019. So, maling informasyon, nakadulot lalo ng maling pagtugon natin o pagtanggap sa bakuna. At nung pinakita nga ni Dr. Cabral kahapon during the press conference niya sa Malacanang, dun sa isang survey na kinonduct from 2018-2019 compared to before that time, ang laki ng binagsak ng vaccine confidence sa Pilipinas dahil na-attribute natin yun sa gulo ng Dengvaxia.
Doc, let me bring in Ana Marie Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star from the Port area in Manila. Ami.
Good evening, Doctor. Sorry I'm late. Doctor, actually, yung vaccine hesitancy dito is more on hesitancy toward vaccines made in China. So next week, dadating dito yung Pfizer and Moderna. Baka ang maging problema dyan, maraming mga taong gustong mag-jump ng queue. But hindi pa rin sasapat yun for the Covovax facility. 44 million, 22 million Filipinos lang ang kaya nun. Hindi pa rin kaya, kailangan pa rin natin mag-source from other countries. So, most likely, kukuha rin pa rin tayo sa Sinovac. Now, anong pwede kaya natin gawin? Kasi dito talaga natatakot yung mga tao. Anong suggestion nyo? Kaya pa bang ma-overcome yun? Kasi up to now, yung sa Dengvac siya, hindi pa rin natatapos. Ayaw pa rin na ma-assured pointed out. Ayaw pa rin ng mga taong magpa-vaccinate ng Dengvac siya. Anong strategy ang pwedeng gawin? Pagdating dito ng Sinovac, I think it will arrive here. So, may dadating nga na 500,000. Anong pwedeng gawin to overcome that kind of vaccine hesitancy?
Tama po yun. Ang inaayawan natin yung made in China kasi masyadong na-politicize yung issue. Ang maaari natin gawin dito, still, turuan pa rin yung ating mga kababayan kung ano talaga ang mabuting maidudulot ng vaccine na ito kahit na made in China. Lumabas na yung isang clinical trial ng bakunang ito, yung galing sa China, at nagsasabi na nape-prevent nito ang severe disease. 100% prevention of severe disease. Dapat nating ituro sa ating mga kababayan na ang isang epektibong bakuna ay hindi lamang nagpe-prevent ng pagkakaroon ng sakit, kung hindi nape-prevent dapat yung pagkakaroon ng matindi or severe na sakit, kung saan doon makakatulong ang bakunang galing sa China.
Pero
At
kahit,
isa pa, yes.
Doc, kahit sa medical community, mga nakausap namin previously mga doctors sinasabi nila even within the medical community, there's resistance to vaccines made in China. Kayo na yung nakakaalam nun. Paano gagawin yun?
Nung kausap namin si Dr.
mahirap.
Benjamin Ko po, dating FDA Director, si Dr. Benjamin Ko, sinabi po niya yun na even in the medical community, of course we don't know if you've been hearing different, gusto nilang mamili kung anong ituturok sa kanila, hindi lang basta kahit anong bakuna raw. Yun po ang sabi niya. Kayo po.
Sa Makati, di ba? Yung mga doctors daw in Makati, ayaw daw nila ng made in China. Paano sasabihin sa nila?
Para doon sa mga medical practitioners na may hesitancy din sa paggamit ng bakuna galing China, siguro mas makakabuti kung sila mismo ang tumingin sa mga pananaliksik sa bakunang ito kasi makikita natin talaga kung gaano ito ka-epektibo sa pag-prevent ng severe na disease. Madali yun kung para sa mga dalubhasang medical, pero yun na nga, sa karaniwang tao, lubhang napakahirap na kumbinsihin sila na epektibo kahit nagawa sa China. So, kailangan natin ng tulong ng lahat, ng medical, pati na rin yung politiko, sabihin sa kanila na kumonsulta sa tamang eksperto upang malaman natin talaga kung gaano ka-epektibo ang iba't ibang klase ng bakuna. Hindi lang isang bakuna ang kakailanganin natin. Dahil buong mundo nangangailangan ng bakuna, hindi lahat ng bakuna ng Pfizer o ng Moderna maaring ibigay sa Pilipinas. Kailangan talaga natin mag-source out galing sa ibang bansa tulad ng sa China or maging sa Russia kung sakaling maaprubahan yung Sputnik.
Well, Doc, I think we all agree naman with everything you said. In very broad strokes, diba? I think there's no point of disagreement there. But however, let me try to get you to operationalize the concepts that you've been talking about. In layman's terms, in very real terms po, how would you want this education program to be operationalized? Ano po dapat, sino po yung haharap, ano pong dapat sabihin, saan po dapat lumabas, and so on down the line. In concrete terms po.
Una yung mga medical experts, no? Kasama na rin dyan yung mga barangay health workers. Makakatulong talaga sila kasi sila yung nasa grassroots. Sila yung mas maaabot ng ating mga kababayan sa mga lalawigan o sa mga probinsya na hindi naaabot ng mga doktor. Pangalawa, massive media campaign talaga. Mass media, social media, yung mga social influencers na maaaring makatulong sa atin para ipaabot sa mga kababayan ang lahat ng mga tamang informasyon. Kailangan natin yun. tingin ko kung paulit-ulit natin gagawin at sasabihin ang tamang informasyon, eventually maniniwala rin ang ating mga kababayan dito.
Okay.
Pero mahirap. Mahirap talagang baliktarin yung vaccine hesitancy ng ating mga kababayan.
Okay.
Lalo na nga dun sa nangyari tungkol sa...
Okay. And we certainly hope to help in that cause of sending the right information out there and telling our people about what are the proper things that they should know and hopefully encourage them in this matter. So, Dr. Francisco Tranquilino of the UP College of Medicine, maraming salamat po for joining us. And now,
Thank you, sir.
We are still on COVID.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, we're still on COVID,
Thank you,
and
Rob.
we're still on finding a cure, but we want to bring in our next guest, who earlier said fixation on vaccines might be counterproductive. Joining us is Sonny Africa, Executive Director of IBON Foundation. Mr. Africa, once again, welcome to the Chiefs.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, Sonny.
Bobby.
Okay.
Siyempre.
Okay. Now, Mr. Africa, we've been talking about vaccines. Everybody's excited, everybody's eager, everybody's panicking. Obviously, everybody's concerned. But, I mean, really, fixation on vaccines? Counterproductive? What exactly do you mean?
Siyempre, when we talk about vaccines, we think it's a cure-all for whatever virus we're trying to deal with. But the thing is, it's so straightforward. Other countries in Southeast Asia, Vietnam especially, they've contained their virus, they're on the path back to normalcy, even without the vaccine. So parang we think it's counterproductive in the sense that the government's using it to distract from the fact that they're actually not doing enough testing and tracing yet. And actually, may suspicion nga ako baka si Mayor Magalong maybe designing because of the difficulty in getting proper contact tracing ratios. I think the ratio they have now is 1/4 yata, or even 1/5 of the ideal. So, if we keep talking about the vaccine without talking more about proper testing, tracing, more selective isolation, quarantines and isolation, the damage is going to happen while we're waiting for the vaccine. And the harm is going to be much bigger kahit nandun na yung vaccine.
Well, in fact, I think we're already there. I mean, I think we do know where you're coming from. Basically, di ba, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And sana nandun na tayo sa prevention dati pa. On the other hand, here we are. I mean, that's the reality. We did not prevent, and therefore, this is where we are, and therefore, we need to invest in this pound of cure.
Yeah. We agree we have to invest as much as we can in the vaccine. Actually, even the vaccine response was very slow. So actually, there are criticisms of that as well. But their point is, if the government really wants to solve the pandemic, especially the difficulties, the suffering by so many millions of families now, it's so simple. They have to test and trace better. See Mayor Magalo, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I heard an interview of his. He was saying we're doing 1:6 or 1:7 contact tracing. In the same interview, he was asked what's the ideal. Sabi niya, in rural areas that are less populated, 1:25. In urban areas that are more populated, as much as 1:37. So parang that's a report from our head tracer in the middle of January, 10 months after the vaccine first hit the Philippines. And he's saying our tracing is basically 1/4 to 1/5 of what should be done. So parang that's the problem we have to face right now. Well, the vaccine, syempre, but I mean, let's contain the virus that's already spreading in our communities now.
Mr. Africa, your foundation conducts a lot of studies on poverty. Sa tingin nyo, which areas need more attention now? Even as our government tries to procure vaccines, ano pa yung sa tingin nyo parang medyo napapabayaan yata?
Lahat napapabayaan. Sorry, I don't mean to be facetious, pero it's grabe talaga. The last few days I've seen one news after the other of how literally neglectful the government is. When the news came out of the inflation rate yesterday, when the fourth quarter figures and 2020 whole year figures came out last week, when the NEDA acting secretary said that there's no more need for ayuda, it just didn't, parang hindi ko ma-connect yung dots. It didn't make any sense because in the same way, they have a lot of rhetoric about how bad the crisis is. I mean, I've seen our economic managers talk about increased unemployment. It's underestimated pa. The government officially reports about 3.8 million unemployed, our estimates, it's closer to 5.8 to 6 million unemployed. But si Secretary Chua, sinabi niya in his presentation, there were an additional 33 million hungry Filipinos. There were an additional, I think, 5.7 or 4.5 million poor. When you say something like that, it is a problem. Diba, in the next breath, you want the solution. But he said, hindi. Let's open the malls. Let's no more need to give ayuda. Let's push for create. Let's put more money in big corporations rather than people's pockets. It just doesn't make sense. Eh. So ang dami ko sinabi, but it's so frustrating. It's so simple. The government should give more cash transfers to the poorest Filipinos right now. It improves their welfare, and actually it stimulates the economy, makes debt drawdowns, payback much easier in the years to come.
So parang consumption-driven. Well, Sonny, let me broaden the topic a bit more. Well, of course, IBON deals a lot with economic data. Now, of course, you do know that yung Kongreso has gotten the ball rolling for charter change, specifically yung economic provisions doon sa Constitution with that one-liner na unless provided for by law. Anong pananaw ng IBON doon? Will that help if you loosen the restrictions on the 60-40, for example, on investments from abroad? How does that go?
Well, una-una, it's amazing actually how opportunistic the government is for pushing its pet bills, no? Yung create law for income tax cuts, biglang naging stimulus COVID response. Itong Econ Chacha, biglang naging road to recovery for the Philippines. It's so simple actually in terms of Econ Chacha. I heard Speaker Lord Velasco's timeline. He said that he was looking for ratification in May 2022. If ratification is on May 2022, even the first centavo or the first dollar of foreign investment won't come in for months or years after that. So any sort of connection between COVID response, recovery, and Econ Chacha, that's completely meaningless. It's so much bunk. And again, I've seen so many absurd claims na may pseudoscientific rigor. They have estimates of so many billions of dollars in investments and so many millions of jobs created. Walang science at all to make those kinds of estimations, but they're being thrown around by the Chacha proponents. Ngayon, sa amin, on a long-term view, the government has to accept foreign investment can help the country, but that's to come on very specific conditions where they're regulated to contribute to long-term development. And we always insist, if you look at the experiences of the last breakout economies, basically it's South Korea and Taiwan in Asia, if you look at their breakout period ng 70s and 80s, they actually have less foreign investment in their economies during the breakout period. So the Philippines is receiving now. And actually, in the early 1970s, the Philippines, South Korea, and Taiwan, itong breakout period ng South Korea and Taiwan, they had more or less the same amount of foreign investment. So this parang intuitive gut feel na more capital, more foreign investment, that's going to lead to development. It's completely debunked by the last experience of industrial development in Asia, South Korea, and Taiwan. And I would argue, it's a negative example sa Philippines. We've had billions of dollars in foreign investment since the 1980s. Marami dyan have gone into electronics through Intel, shipbuilding through Hanjin, natural gas development through Malampaya. But at the end of it, after decades of this investment, wala tayong Filipino electronics industry, wala tayong Filipino shipbuilding industry, wala tayong Filipino natural gas industry because they're just here to make a profit. And if you don't regulate them to contribute to local productivity, local science and technology, local capacity, they'll pack up and leave, like Intel did a few years ago, leaving nothing in the Philippines.
Okay, so if it's not foreign ownership or foreign investment even that triggered or fueled the breakout for those countries, what is it? Can you boil it down to a simple formula?
Their simple formula was to develop Korean, South Korean, and Taiwanese industrial capitalists. And they protected all those South Korean, Taiwanese industrialists. They protected the economy. They gave subsidies. When the chaebols, when the corporations weren't delivering, they pulled out the subsidies. that's what they did. And I think sobrang important sa amin because if you look at the last 40 years of globalization, there's no other new industrialist country developed. No other country that has followed all the mga neoliberal globalization precepts has graduated to developed country status. And I think that's so revealing. And that says a lot about what kind of economic policies we need. And also says a lot about how backward and textbook-oriented our economic managers are after so rich in economic history in other countries.
Related pa rin sa pandemic response and poverty alleviation, what do you want to see sa immediate or short-term measures or policies na i-implement kagad ng gobyerno?
Alam mo, just kagabi lang, before going to sleep, I was looking at Joe Biden's policies for the US. Grabe, we should do what the US is doing. I never thought I'd say this.
Sige, specific.
We should give more cash assistance to the poorest Filipinos. I think giving 10,000 pesos again to the poorest 18 million Filipino families, putting money in Filipino families' pockets because those bottom 75% Filipinos, they have no savings at all. Isang kahit isang tuka sila. So putting 10,000 pesos a month for maybe 2 to 3 months in their pockets, one, would immediately improve their welfare. Secondly, it will actually stimulate the economy because the more or less 180 billion pesos that you're giving to them, they're not going to save that. They're going to be spending that in the local economy. And our counterpoint there is infrastructure. If you give 180 billion pesos to a, Mega Manila subway, maybe half or more than half is going to go to Japan, the contractors to import the contractors, equipment, the materials. In China nga, we're importing labor din. So for us, immediately, big cash subsidies to the poorest Filipinos. But at the same time, parang inflationary, real support for micro, small, medium enterprises. And businesses aren't opening now because they know they have no markets apart from the quarantine still in place. So, and again, the reason it's so amazing that bank lending turned negative last month. That's crazy. It's the first time in like 14 years where bank lending turned negative. It means mga negosyo, there are not going to be any customers there.
But there are those who would argue na na wala raw pera yung gobyerno for more SAPs.
Siyempre, that's a matter of judgment, no? Sa amin, the one-liner is, if the government is willing to give big corporations and foreign firms 133 billion pesos under CREATE, that takes away their moral high ground to say na walang pera. Because they're giving up a sure thing, 133 billion pesos for no stimulus effect. Pero on the larger scale, there's money. I mean, you're looking at the 1.1 trillion peso infrastructure program right now for 2021. A lot of the feasibility studies were made at a time na everyone was so giddy about growth prospects. A lot of those projects aren't going to be feasible anymore. And a lot of those projects are very import intensive. So parang post-pandemic, with such huge poverty, such huge unemployment, medyo nagabago yung social and economic priorities. You can be more selective. And we'd argue, a lot of these big-ticket infrastructure projects, the money the government is spending for that is better spent on cash subsidies. And that's only the pinaka-short term. We'd also argue, instead of borrowing again from development agencies, what is it to talk to the World Bank and the ADB? Hey guys, pa-time out naman for a couple of years kasi we really need the money. Instead of us borrowing more money to spend, can we sort of not service our debts muna? Kasi I think a lot of people are forgetting, whatever the World Bank ADB lent us last year, actually we paid back as debt servicing last year and we will be paying back this year. So sa amin, mas rational, hey, time out muna, get over this debt repayment fixation. Tapos long term, kaya super na-amaze talaga ako with Joe Biden. There is money in the Philippine economy. It's just not being taxed. Does it make sense that you have 50 Filipinos with a net worth of 4.1 billion pesos, but that wealth isn't being taxed at all? So, a 1%, 2%, 3% tax can generate a few 100 billion pesos there. Why not implement a wealth tax, borrow against that wealth tax, and repay that debt with the wealth tax you'll be earning? Tapos last point, again, recently we computed lang. A lot of our infrastructure projects are making commercial developers really wealthy. If you build a an MRT, LRT, property values around the stations, they go up 3, 4, 5 times. No one's taxing that windfall increase. It's basically subsidized wealth of our oligarchs by the government because they built a transport system. So parang there can be money. It's not going to be easy, of course, but there can be money if we tried hard enough. We're a bit more creative and actually, put our heart in it. There are options. Just, hindi na kailangan pag-business as usual. Okay?
Okay. Okay, Sonny Africa, Executive Director ng IBON Foundation. Sonny, thank you for joining us tonight.
Okay,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Ed.
Maraming salamat.
Salamat. Good night.
We will just go into a break, so please stay with us.
Welcome back, the Chiefs are on One News. We are now in the final stage of our conversation. Now joining us is Vergel Santos, trustee and former chair of the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility. Good evening, Mr. Santos.
Hi, guys.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, every time you're here, it can only mean somebody in government went viral for all the wrong reasons again. No, but of course, you're here.
Please don't blame it on me.
No, we're not. You're the messenger. We're all the messenger here. But of course, we are talking about the messengers yet again. And we are talking again about NTF-ELCAC, the military intelligence. Just last week, the head of intelligence for the military was fired. And then now you have NTF-ELCAC's Antonio Parlade red tagging a journalist essentially for doing her job at the Supreme Court of all places at a week that we are lawyers are fighting the anti-terror law of all times. I wanted to lay down the entire predicate because I wanted to ask you. We know what you will say, but what I want to know is there no way that journalists can go on the offense here rather than just always defending themselves, other than asking for an apology?
Yeah, I can't quite understand why it should be done that way, really. I mean, it is clear enough that this is something that cannot be blamed on them. This is, in the case of military intelligence, actually, it was not a failure of intelligence. It was a failure of far more common sense. It's not. How can you be recycling a list of enemies of the state? I can't quite understand all this. And the problem is that we seem to be taking these things isolatedly. When you have a list coming, you have Parlade coming on and indicting just about anyone the regime fancies. It should be taken in the context of a larger scheme, which should include, one, the militarization of the bureaucracy, two, the draconian anti-terrorism law, and three, precisely that, the red tagging. They are all connected and all part of a single strategy to intimidate the media, not only the media, but all detractors and dissenters. That seems to me so plain. I don't know why a lot of what of stray thinking and words are spent on this very simple thing. This when you have an authoritarian regime, the decent position to take is necessarily left of that regime, di ba? Because that authoritarian regime has occupied, hijacked, in fact, the entire right of the political spectrum. That's why it's noble to be leftist. That is, of course, to say liberal, not
Yes, sir.
not,
Sir,
not,
be careful with your
not
words, ha?
communist.
Baka
Ikaw,
expanded na yung
Or
definition ng
Ikaw, we heard you.
your act, ha?
No, but that's the point, di ba?
Ah.
It's a noble, that's
No,
a
but
noble
like,
position to,
like I said, that's what I want to ask is what should be the options? What are, as you said, not just journalists but lawyers and so on. And let's take out challenging the anti-terror law because that's already there.
yeah,
But
that's
when
there.
but when journalists are red tagged, human rights defenders are red tagged, CSOs, civil society,
Yes,
NGOs are red tagged.
yes.
How far should they take it?
There is no limit to taking it. We should fight. We should we should be more vigorous in our dissent. We should be more vocal. In fact, we should come together. That this is the time, I think, that people like us, not just media people, but people who have decided to take as I've said, the decent position, which is left of this regime, to come together and call out this regime. We know what this regime is out for. It wants to stay in power. It's clear enough. It wants to escape.
Sir,
a lot of
let me pick up on what you said earlier. Na we should fight. But let me ask you to begin with. Are CSOs, our journalist groups, our media organizations really fighting back? Are they fighting back
They're
enough?
not. We have become a timid. There is a between the left and the authoritarian right. There is a space which is occupied by many journalists. It is the fence, meaning they are timid.
The fence is getting bigger.
They
Is that
don't
what you're saying?
want to. Yeah, exactly. They're timid. And you know what timid means? It means intimidated.
Okay.
That's where some of us are. And of course, enough of us have seem happy co-opted. But we should be able to draw the line now.
Yeah. I mean, let me not take it necessarily, and I see where your point about being co-opted, but I want to see it from the perspective of, I know a lot of good journalists who also proceed from the assumption that there's a dilemma. How I don't want to be the story, right? I want to know.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when you are already the target and the victim, essentially, what are your options without? Or is there no such thing as not crossing the line? Is there such a thing as no? You've already been, you're already crossed over.
Yes.
You're already a victim. You have two hats now. You have the hat of the journalist, and you have the hat of an aggrieved victim who is entitled to some kind of legal redress.
No, that's just another problem. When a journalist starts thinking that there is a dilemma here, I mean, that's the journalist who is prepared less to fight than to be timid. Because there is no dilemma here. The idea here is to fight and not think of yourself as a victim. Because, I mean, we should have become used by now that whether the regime be an authoritarian one or a more benign one, we will be victims. Because that is our role. Being watchdog
Yes,
is to be victimized by by uh, by uh, by by uh, by our targets. That's necessary.
Yes, sir.
But
But
if you
sir,
start thinking of there being a dilemma here, or some impasse, or something that cannot be easily resolved, I cannot quite understand that.
well, sir, but
I cannot
kasi,
understand.
sir, to Roby's point, um, um, where's the point where a journalist can say that I am being critical,
We should
and
we should mount
and where is
we
the
should
point
mount
when a
more of
journalist
these
can
things
say,
that we are doing.
but or
We should
when,
mount more of these things that we are doing.
yes, sir, and where is the point where a journalist should not say that I am anti-government? I mean, of course, you can be one or the other, but not necessarily
You
both.
cannot be not anti this government, because journalists are supposed to be biased in favor of truth, freedom, and justice, which we don't have. How can you then even debate with yourself on whether you are in favor of or against this government? I can't quite understand this either.
Yeah. Let me take it from the current example. What we're talking about. Parlade attacks Tej Torres of the Inquirer, basically for doing her job, for digging into the records of the Supreme Court so that she has a real basis for a story. And she's ragtagged all the same. She's threatened with anti-terror laws all the same. And all credit to the Justice Beat reporters for circling their wagons and having her back and speaking out and asking for an apology. But that's where my question is. At the point that they asked for an apology, where would you have taken it beyond asking for an apology?
No, you never ask for an apology, because an apology is freely given. It is only when an apology is freely given that you can start thinking that probably it is a sincere apology. This is how it is. So you don't even ask for an apology. But the problem is, someone like Parlade, given that clearly he has nothing except an indictment that he has decided for himself. I mean, we are not saying, do you have documents? Do you have any court, any court allowed action that you can take? You have none, and therefore this Parlade should be booted out of any position that has to do with dealing with us. You know, at least any position dealing with us. That's all. He should call for his sacking. That's the only way to do it. You know, and then if he is not sacked, then we start going to the people who should sack him. It's simple enough. I think it is not simplistic. It's simple.
Yes, sir.
Except that some people, I think, some of us, not just us, but other people, find it consoling to themselves to debate with themselves and look for some reason to be less bold than they should be. That's how it is. These times call for boldness. You know, that's the truth of it. Now you're not talking of objectivity now. You're talking of the objectivity when you are writing a news story.
Exactly.
But even a news is-
That's precisely why I was asking. Is there, how do you go on offense here? I mean, speaking for media and civil society.
Yes. Every news story has more to it than the facts. A news story, the facts will be meaningless unless put in context or put in perspective and explained. You know, you cannot simply say that these are the facts. We should start saying this is what the facts mean. This is what reporting today calls for more than simply narrating a factual narration. It will require a lot of explanation, a lot of making sense, and I don't know, but
Well, yes,
I
actually, sir,
we-
I think we all agree on that. I think the context in the information and all the details that we put in the story would enrich the story further and push the
Yes.
story further. But let me go back, sir, to what I think would be would be a point of interesting discussion, not just among journalism circles, but within journalism schools in the years to come. In essence. Can or should a journalist take a position already on whether he's anti-government or just critical at this particular time without necessarily undermining the basic principles that he has stood for from the very start, which I suppose would be finding that balance, trying to capture objectivity, putting in the proper context and all that.
The first thing that should be taught journalists is that there is no mathematical formula that will allow you to find balance or fairness. The certain basic thing here is that journalists are supposed to be biased in favor of truth,
Yes, sir.
freedom,
Yes,
and
sir.
justice.
We
Every
agree with
time
that, sir.
that line is crossed, the journalist should hold anyone accountable for that crossing. That's basic enough, And all we need to do is that. But when you start setting, do I have the proper balance here? No.
No, but that's my point. I mean,
It's not.
to your point about accountability, we're all journalists, we're all in media. We always say the pen is mightier than sword, blah blah blah, and so all of that. And therefore, we convince ourselves, look, our means of accountability is writing more stories, exposing more things, contextualizing more things. My question precisely, and to put a finer point to Ed's point, not so much to take a position for or against, but rather to just tell yourself, can I sue? Should I sue? I know I'm a journalist. I have my platform on the one hand. I have my voice. It's not as if I cannot counter Parlade, and so on. But do I have a standing actually to say, wait, I'm still a citizen whose life is now in danger because of something very reckless that a military officer did? Should I sue? Or should I consciously tell myself the way to seek accountability for a professional journalist is to keep doing journalism?
Well, you can sue. I'm not saying that one cannot sue, that a journalist can sue. Anybody can sue. But if you ask me, I will not even allow that kind of distraction to interfere with the job that I do as a journalist. I don't need to sue. I mean, I just do my job.
But why not? I mean, look, two examples. Two examples in the past week. The UP alumni who were tagged were not all journalists. Some of them were lawyers, right? Most prominently, lawyers, government officials, and so on. Then the next group that was red tagged prominently this week, journalists. The lawyer said, we just might sue, right?
Yes.
And that led to the firing of the intelligence officer. The journalists are saying, look, this is a right position. Right? I'm not saying it's the wrong position. It's the right position.
No, I'm not saying it's wrong or it's not all right either.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody can sue.
Yeah.
I'm saying a journalist can sue. If you ask me, under these circumstances, I will not be distracted by any suits that I will myself file. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I just go on doing my job. But I can't. But it does not stop any journalist from suing. Of course, they can sue. Whether they should sue, but if at all a suit might be effective, it should be a collective suit.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
It depends on what kind of suit you intend to.
Okay, let's take
file.
it there. Does the media community have standing right now to say that our sector is under attack? Are NGOs, for example, CSOs, not just us, do any of these civil society sectors have standing for a class suit to say that we are threatened?
I think we do. I think we do because of because the nature of our representations. We are not. We are representing definitely a class here. you know, what I think a noble class in any case. But so why not? This is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if I were in that position, I will start weighing uh, weighing the distraction with my job. I mean, that's all I'm saying. That's why every time I am asked, what do we do with this? Mount forums like what you're doing now, more of that, and do so in and do things more in en masse, collectively, than individually. You know, that's why I have I have been advocating a drawing of the line from many years back. I mean, it's time journalists drew the line between us and them. I mean, are you saying that we don't know who they are and who we are?
Wait, sir, just for clarity, when you say a line between us and them, who's them and who's us? Just to clarify things.
Definitely, the Times is not us. Definitely, PTV4 is not us. I can recite all these things. I can even go to names, and I can defend my position that they are not us, and that they are they, and therefore not us. I mean, again, you know, the problem is we are leaving so much room for debate when debate is not necessary, or or any reasonable debate could be had at this time. This is the point. In the meantime, while we are debating with each other and with ourselves, we are being waylaid by these people. This is what I'm saying. You know, our position, our situation in this country under this regime is 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 different from the more fortunate nations who can enjoy their democracy without the kind of problems that we have. In fact, our own democracy is so fragile because of the of the culture that we have. You know, I cannot imagine. I do not think that the institutions of democracy have taken root in this country.
Yeah. And
You know, it's a problem.
Vergel, it's precisely to that point that you are a board member of the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility. To your point,
Yes.
all of the things are not necessarily new, are not necessarily limited to this administration. This administration magnifies and focuses on
Yes,
on
exactly.
certain problems, but a lot of these problems are there. I'm just curious, over the years, over the decades, and CMFR and many organizations have even reached out to the military, to the police, to try, and there's this whole effort also to educate the military and the police on human rights, for example, or the value of press freedom. Where has that gone? What has been the value of that? In all objectivity and honesty.
You know, the value of that has been the value of that has been offset by the culture in the military. It is a culture, a very hierarchical culture. It is a culture that have it is a culture in which soldiers have known and become convinced that the communists are the enemy. That is the kind of culture that the people who are trying to be to have a reasonable balance between that kind of power and our kind of freedom is up against. It's not so easy to do that. I can understand, you know, because precisely because of the culture in which we live, in which we have always lived. But please understand that under certain governments, we were comparatively fine. The going was fair and good, but not this time. This is why I'm saying what we have now is a de facto authoritarian regime. This is what we have. How can a president of a country surrender a sovereignty to another nation just like that? You know, how can they just pick up anyone without a court order? How can they indict just about anyone that they fancy? How can this happen in this country? Tell me, this is different. This did not happen at other times. This only happened now. This is only happening now and happened in Marcos's time. Arroyo was not a benign ruler, but we could deal with her in easier terms, on easier terms. But not this one. This is a problem that I think all of us, not just journalists, should realize.
Okay.
This is different.
Yes,
This is
sir.
different.
Well, we do hope to continue the conversation here and also in other fora. Vergel
Yes.
Santos, trustee and former chairman of the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility, or CMFR. Sir, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you,
guys.
Vergel.
More power,
Always a
more
pleasure.
power to
Thank you
you.
po.
Thank you.
Well, just for disclosure, I'm also part of CMFR. And that'll be all for this special edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Edwin Gao.
And I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News.